Hello friends, it's Chari, and today I am creating two cards using the new products from the little snow globe release. The first card I will be creating today is a reveal wheel card using the new little snow globe dog stamp set. So I'm going to start by stamping out my images that I'm going to color. And I've got the dresser, the dog, and 3 of the little snow globe scenes in this set. I'm also going to pull out the Christmas helpers and the Christmas dreams stamp sets and pull a few little images from there to help fill in my scene and create a little story. So I've got some wrapping paper, teddy bear, that little candle, and the bone with a bow. Now, of course, I want to color my little dog like my dog Scout, and she is a black and tan dachshund. So we have the brown that's on her muzzle, her feet, kind of her chest there. She has a little brown right on the edge of her ear, and of course that little dot above her eye, which me and my husband call baked bean eyebrows. We saw that on social media once, and they have been baked bean eyebrows ever since because they are adorable. Then I'm moving on to the black part of her fur, and I like to color black images with dark grays so that I do not lose the definition of the lines of the image. So I'm starting out with that dark gray, which is that W7, and I just kind of outlined where the shadows and the edges will be, and then I'll come in with that W5 and start to blend that dark bit out a little bit. You can see I'll go back in and add some in a little bit because I do want her to still look like a black and tan puppy, but I don't want to lose too much of that definition. So I'll pull in, you can see I'm going back and forth between the dark and the light, but I like that you can still see her little eye there. That's the part I don't want to lose. I want to keep her little eye. Now for the dresser, I'm going to basically color this in 2 colors. So for the drawers, I wanted to use a lighter brown. I've just done a darker on the edges and then pulled it in with a lighter. And then for the body of the dresser, I'll pull out some darker browns. I'm adding the darker of the 2 under the drawers, under the top, and then in the little curves of the feet. And then I will pull that out with the lighter of those 2 colors and kind of blend it. I will be going back to this with an even darker brown and adding a little bit of detail. And I just like that this look kind of makes those drawers stand out a little bit, and we don't have this just big brown piece of furniture. We have a little definition between them. Then I'm using some gray for the top and the drawer pulls. And then here's where I'm going to go back in with a dark brown and just do some lines, just some wood grain line details. That kind of gives it a little more interest so it's not so flat looking. Now to move on to all the little images, I have those little scenes that go in the snow globe. And I'm not going to worry too much with shading on these. So I'm just using 1 shade of brown for my gingerbread man. I'm using 1 shade of green for my tree. And then of course I've got a little orange for the candle flame, the nose of that snowman. And then I'll use a cream color for the candle, which I consider to be white. And then I'm doing the same for the dog bone. Now for my snow, I'm pulling out a very pale aqua color, and I'm just tracing underneath the line of the snowy hill and underneath the image that's sitting on that hill. And that will just kind of define that edge a little bit and give it a little bit of color. And then for my snowy areas on my images, I'm just using a cool gray, a really light cool gray to color those white. I've got a red bow on my bone, and then on my wrapping paper, I'm using a pale aqua color again. This is that same color I used for the snowy hills. And I will be doing some stamping on this before I put it on the card. And then, of course, I have the little bear, which I'm considering the toy that Scout will be wrapping up for Christmas for a friend. So I'm just going to do a little bit of shading underneath the chin and the feet, but not too much because this is a pretty small image. Of course, I'll use my coordinating dies to cut all of these images out, and then I'll just set these aside for now, and we will come back to those later. While I'm prepping pieces for my scene, I'm also going to cut the Christmas garland from some green sparkle cardstock. I'm going to use this green in the holiday pack, but you can also buy a pack of just green sparkle cardstock. And then I've cut the little berries and the pieces for the bow from some red cardstock. And I'll just set these pieces aside with my images to assemble later. Now I'm moving on to the reveal wheel part of the card. So I've pulled out the wheel as well as the little spacer wheel that goes on the back where we adhere it to the card. And I'm going to cut both of these from some blue Moonstone cardstock so it looks like a snowy sky. So there are those two pieces that will layer behind our front panel. And now I'm pulling out the little snow globe reveal wheel dog add-on. So this will cut the opening in the front reveal wheel panel. I also have the body of the snow globe, and then there's a couple decorative pieces for the bottom. I'll be using this little piece here that has little snowflakes in it, and I'll just cut that from red. For the main body of the snow globe, I've pulled out the Shimmer Cardstock Neutrals pack, and I'm using this sort of shimmery gray silvery color. So here are all those little pieces cut out, and now I can take my reveal wheel panel. This is from the reveal wheel set, and then I'm using that little puzzle piece that comes with the little snow globe dog reveal wheel add-on. I'll just pop that into the hole. I do have a little piece of tape that stays on my die. I actually probably need to replace it because it has lost a lot of its sticky. But I'm going to cut two of these panels. I'm cutting one from white, and then I'm also going to cut one from pattern paper, and that's just to layer them together for a little more stability because the pattern paper is not as heavy as just regular cardstock is. I'm also cutting the bottom of this panel from a piece of that coffee table pattern paper, which has that really fun wood grain, and that's going to be the floor for my little dog and my dresser to sit on. So you can see I'm remaking a card that I made previously, and I just went ahead and figured out how high up I need to cut this, which it's about 1.5 inches, and that was a good spacing to be at the bottom for my dresser to sit on and that snow globe to fall right in the perfect place. I will go ahead and add a little bit of liquid glue and put this base on the snow globe so I don't lose that on my desk. And then I'm just setting that aside in my little dish with my other images for later. Now for the sentiment, I am using the sentiment in this set that says Merry Christmas, and I'm going to white emboss this onto this pattern paper. I'm putting it in my MISTI, and I'll pick it up, and I'm stamping this with some clear ink. And then I will just use some white embossing powder. Now I did forget to prep this with my anti-static powder, but it turned out okay. I didn't have too many stray pieces. And then I'll just heat this up with my heat tool till I get that bright white sentiment. Now I did do some inking with some walnut ink just to kind of darken up the edges so that this piece of paper that is our floor doesn't look quite so flat. And then I also added some really fine gold splatters to the background piece. You don't see them too much, and I know this is already a piece of pattern paper, but it just added a little bit of magical shimmer to the card. So I'll set that aside to dry, and I'm going to work on the wheel. So we have the reveal wheel templates. These are the ones specifically for the dog. There are two. One has 3 openings, one has 4, and I'm going to use the one with 4. So I just taped this onto my wheel so it doesn't shift around while I do my stamping. I'm using the sentiment that says Joy to You, which is part of that stamp set in one of them. And then I'm stamping out my little scenes, and I'm doing this just for placement purposes. You could do this and color them if this was on white, or you could color them with colored pencils if you want to do it on the blue like I'm doing. But really, I'm stamping these so I know where that circle falls, and then when I put my die cut piece on there, I can just line it right up with my stamped image. Now I'm adding the snow, and I'm using some mermaid ink, and then this little pie-shaped stamp that has all the snow is meant to fill the whole wheel with snow. So you put the point at the center, and then you stamp all 4 quadrants. So you can see here now I'm using those stamped images just to line up my little pieces, and this works perfect because now it covers up the snow that was on my image, and I just think it looks perfect. So now they're all in the right place to go behind the opening. Now I'm layering my two pieces together that I cut just to kind of make that pattern piece a little more stiff. And I can start to assemble the whole front of my card. So I'll add my flooring to the bottom. And then I have a piece of white wood grain cardstock. I'm just going to cut a strip that is 1/4 inch wide. And this is going to be the baseboard for my little scene. So I'll just add a line of glue and butt this piece of white wood grain cardstock right up against the top of the pattern wood grain cardstock. And then I can just trim off the excess on each end. Then I'm taking that little snow globe that I cut from the reveal wheel add-on and adding that to frame up the opening. And then I can take my dresser and just I'm tucking it right underneath just the very bottom of the snow globe. It kind of covers up that white part of the die cut, and it makes it look like it's sitting on that dresser. I also have a couple of the little things that I stamped and colored to decorate my dresser. So I have that cute little candle. And then this is the bone that's for Scout. So we got to put it up high so she can't get it until Christmas. Now I'm taking a piece of spiffier speckles paper and just trimming this down to be slightly smaller than an A2 size card. And that's so I can get a little border of this off-white cardstock of my card base, that vanilla malt cardstock, just a little border around each side. So I will go ahead and put that adhesive on the back and get that onto my card base. And I just think that makes a nice little frame. And then let's start to assemble our reveal wheel. So you want to take the tiny brad and stick it through the small circle. And this goes on the back of the wheel where we stamp. So then you want to thread that through and then open up the prongs on the front. And this is so you can put the adhesive, which we're doing foam squares, just on the little tiny wheel. We'll go ahead and pull off the liner papers for those. And then you can line this up in the opening. The easiest one I think to line up is that sentiment because it really fills that. And then you want to make sure that you shift it over to where you don't see the score line on the wheel in the little notch where we're going to spin it. So I'm just going to line this up and pop this on here, and this is only going to adhere down my wheel. So I know my wheel is in the right place. Now I can add some foam squares to my front panel, and you want to make sure you avoid where that wheel is going to be. So I just do the corners and then like an extra one in the middle at the bottom. And then we can just pop that back in place, and you can see how that is going to work perfectly. Now to continue decorating my little living room scene, I've got my garland I cut from glitter paper. I wanted it to stretch all the way across the top, so I just cut it in half, and I'm going to put one on each side. And then the bow will cover up the middle and the void that is created between the two. So with the bow, what you want to do is fold this little piece around. So it will fold around the back and then fold back around the front and create a little bit of a three-dimensional knot for the bow. And I'm just going to hold it with my tweezers and clean up any of that little glue that kind of smushed out. Then I'm adding a dot of glue to the back, and I'll layer the tails of the ribbon behind there, and I'm just going to hold it with my tweezers again so that glue can dry. While that glue is drying, I'm adding my little tiny berries to my garland, and it cuts 6, so I'm just adding 3 on each side. And then I can add my bow to the center just with a little bit of liquid glue. And that will fill that void between them and just make that garland look like it's longer than it was. And now I can finish up all the rest of the images in the scene. Scout has some white. She's a rainbow of all the colors, so I'm adding that detail with a white gel pen. And then also some black glaze to her nose so I get that shiny black nose. I'm adding some foam squares to the back of her so I have some dimension from that dresser behind her, and I'm just going to pop her in there on the left side, gazing up at that snow globe. Now I have the Happy Halloween stamp set, but there are some paws in a bunch of other sets. You just need to look. I'm using some narwhal ink, and I'm stamping her paws on the wrapping paper because she's been so helpful wrapping presents. She just will walk across the wrapping paper when I'm wrapping presents. And I'm going to put some thin foam squares on the back of this. So it's not popped up as much as Scout is. It's a little bit further back, but that's because I'm going to put a regular foam square on the back of the teddy bear so that the teddy bear is popped up a little bit more. And I use a thin one on the bottom where it overlaps the wrapping paper. So Scout is helping wrapping presents for her friends, and she's made her mark on the wrapping paper. Now, of course, I'm adding a little bit of stickles to the flame of the candle. I like to use yellow when I'm doing flames like that. And then I'm adding some stickles to the bow of the bone and then just on the pulls of the dresser. And then, of course, we need to add that little arrow that comes with the reveal wheel to tell the recipient that they need to turn the wheel and see what happens in the snow globe. And here is how that works. It spins perfectly. Everything works well. So here is that final card, and I'm going to pick it up so you can see a little bit more of the sparkle. We got the speckles in the background, the glitter on the garland, and then a little bit of glitter on the images. Next, let's create a second card for this video using the new Poinsettia background stencils. I love this new stencil and I really love how my card turned out. Each of these stencils has a number 1 through 3, so I'm putting them in order. This will tell you how to stencil them in which order to get a perfect background. I will be stenciling on some speckled eggshell cardstock, which I have here, and I'm just going to cut this down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 for my stenciling. I will be trimming it out with a stitched rectangle once I have all my stenciling done. So I'm starting with stencil number 1, and I'm using my grip mat that came from the inside of my stamp wheel. And here are the colors I'm going to use. So I'm going for kind of a lighter pinky poinsettia, and I'm starting with some wild rose ink. And you can see I'm trying to tap it off on that piece of extra cardstock so that I don't get too heavy-handed, because I wanted these to kind of be light. So this is my first layer and will be the big red poinsettia flowers in this design. So I'm just working my way around, making sure I have kind of an even layer of that wild rose color in all of these poinsettia petals. Then I can pull my stencil away, and I really love how that turned out. So I'm moving on to stencil number 2, which is the greenery. And there are etching lines on this that you can line up with those poinsettias you've already stenciled and get this in the perfect placement. Now I'm going to use a few different colors with this particular stencil. So I'm starting with number 2 pencil and a little finger brush and adding that yellow just to the center of my flowers. Then I will move on to all the greenery. So we have holly leaves, we have little sprigs, and we also have branches that have berries on them. And I realized that it would take me forever to do all this color with that little finger dauber, so I'm going to set that aside. I'll use it here in a minute. But I'm going all over with celery stick first. So this is a nice lighter green, and again I'm trying to be not too heavy-handed because I want a lighter tone to this. So I'm tapping off on that extra sheet of paper. And I'll be honest, there's something really magical about stenciling on the speckled eggshell cardstock. I don't know what it is, but I've done it before, and every time I do it, I end up with something I love. So I'm just working my way around, making sure those are all filled in with a layer of that lighter green. Now I'm using the little finger brush, and I'm using some freshly cut grass, which is a bit darker. And if you can tell, I'm trying to just do half, like the bottom half of the openings that are shaped like sprigs, like pine sprigs. So I'm kind of looking for where the little stems are. And I'm just adding a little bit darker green to that area. So currently I'm avoiding the holly leaves, and I'm just doing those little pine boughs. Now for the holly leaves, I thought it would be fun to pull in a different color. So I've got peacock, which is a really pretty teal color. And I think that this goes great with greens. And so this is what I'm using to kind of color and shade the holly leaves. So you can see I'm being really careful to just stick to the holly leaves and kind of give them a two-tone. So the holly leaves are going to be the celery stick with the peacock, and then the little pine sprigs are the celery stick with freshly cut grass. And then when you pull this stencil off, look at that beautiful greenery that I created. I just think it's so pretty. So I'll move on to stencil number 3. This one creates the veining detail on the poinsettias, the little leaves in between, as well as the berries. And I started out with the little finger dauber brush because I thought I might do the berries in a different color, but I ended up doing all of the openings in the stencil in this raspberry color. I am trying to be light-handed at first with the little veining because I didn't want too much contrast between the leaves and the veining. So I'm just putting that in there first, but you're going to see that I will go back in and kind of go over the center a little darker so that there's a little more ink close to the center of the flower and a little less, it kind of variegates out at the ends of the petals. Then, of course, I do need to go in and add in the little petals that are in between, which is what I'm doing here. I'm starting to add those in. And then I decided I'm just going to stick with this color so you can see that I'm going in and I'm adding the berries as well. So once I have all of the raspberry ink filled in on this stencil, I can pull that away and look how beautiful this is. You can see that I did go a little darker on the berries so that they kind of pop a little bit more, but they're all that same ink color. Now, of course, I love some shimmer on a holiday card, and this background looks so pretty with the gold splatter. So I'm using that blue gold and just adding some little shimmery splatters, which I know are really hard to see on camera here, but in real life, it just adds some really fun depth and dimension. So I'll set that aside to dry, and then once it is dry, which it is now, and you can kind of see those shimmers a little bit better now that they've dried, I'm trimming this out with the largest outside in stitch rectangle. So this will give me that lovely stitching edge and then a little bit of a border around it. Now I'm using Henry's ABCs, and I've cut out the word wishes from some blue Jay cardstock, and this is already on a piece of tape because I was going to use this on a different card and I didn't end up doing it. So I've actually had this stuck to my wall for about a week and I just pulled it off and laid it on here, and I thought that looks really good. I'm going to go with that. So I've just laid these out and picked them up with a piece of removable tape, and then I'm putting this onto my panel just as a placeholder while I stamp the word joyful. So this sentiment is from the Winter Scripty Sentiment stamp set. I just want the word joyful. I don't want the word wishes, but instead of cutting my stamp apart, I'm just going to center up joyful on this panel and let wishes hang off the side. And we'll just do some selective inking. So I've picked it up with the door of my Misty, and the way I like to only ink up one part of a sentiment is to take a post-it note and cover up the part that I do not want inked. So I'm just making sure this is covering up wishes, and I have it stuck to the door of the Misty so it doesn't move. I'll use some nice crisp black ink. I really want this sentiment to stand out on that stenciled background, so I'm using some VersaFine Onyx Black, and then I'll just remove the post-it note before I stamp it down. So I have that beautiful scripty joy. Then I'll pull off the die cut letters because I'll be adding some foam to those. And I have some foam strips on the back of the panel as well. And I'm putting this on a card base made from kraft cardstock. So I get that really thin kraft frame or border around my panel. And I really love this look. Now for the letters, I added some thin foam strips. I just cut them in little pieces so that they're hidden behind all those letters. And I think this is a really fun way to add some dimension, especially to kind of a simple graphic card like this with a beautiful background. Just having that die cut sentiment pop up a little bit adds a lot of interest. Now, of course, I want to add some glitter to my holiday cards, and I'm using my stencil images kind of as a guide. I'm adding some dots of glitter to the berries. I'm also adding some dots of glitter to the centers of the poinsettias on those little yellow dots that the stencil created. And then my favorite thing to do with bold die cut messages like this is to add some glitter, and I really like adding it just to the bottom of the letters, almost as if they've been dipped in some glitter. I just really love how this looks. And then here is my finished card with that beautiful poinsettia background. I love this so much. I want to make a bunch more. It's so pretty on that speckled eggshell cardstock, and I love that glittery sentiment. So here is another look at the 2 cards that I created in today's video, and I hope this has inspired you to use those new holiday products and make some really fun holiday cards. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.